Welcome in to PlayerProfiler Primetime News. I'm your host, Mike Greinberg, and joining me, as always, is Coach Retzlaff. This week, we're breaking down key fantasy news, including injury updates on star players like CeeDee Lamb tonight, Isiah Pacheco potentially coming back. Jeremiah's got the top QB and running back performers covered. I will dive into Kyler Murray's bullish outlook and Jeremiah's bearish take on Jonathan Brooks. Plus, Coach Retzlaff will share his Texans offensive breakdown on the Monday Night Primer, and I will give you the Chef's Table preview on the Cowboys. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Yes, Jeremiah, we are back, and we're about 11 weeks done of the season, so I'm going to get you to break down some of the QBs and running backs this coming up to date here. So break it down, buddy.
So we've got, for our performers, our quarterbacks, our running backs will run down, and I'm going to shelf Taysom Hill, ever the controversial positional assignment, whether it's quarterback, tight end. Is it best ball? What happens for Taysom Hill? I'm going to shelf Taysom Hill. He's going to come back later when we run over our tight end. So just know that that's coming. It's on the way. Jared Goff, number one quarterback this week, 34.58 fantasy points. We've seen some volatility for Goff as the Lions have that 1-2 punch in the run game with Gibbs and Montgomery. The Lions put foot in ass 52-6 this week. Goff went 24 of 29. 412 passing yards, 4 touchdown passes, 4 carries for 21 yards on the ground. Jared Goff is number one in our explosive rating with a score of 119. So EPX measures pass plays over 20 yards. Goff was QB 15 heading into this week. Speaking of volatility, Jared Goff has been a top 5 quarterback 3 times this week. This week, fantasy managers feasted. Goff gets the Colts weak secondary in week 12, so you'll be hard-pressed to bench him or worry about any type of volatility. Joe Burrow, 29 fantasy points. In case you went to bed, he had a great game. He feasted. 356 yards passing, 28 rushing with 3 passing touchdowns. No interceptions on 50 pass attempts. Think about that. You throw the ball 50 times. If you're going to lay a bet against a quarterback, you would bet them to get at least 1 interception thrown. Tough loss, but that's been the case. The Bengals defense is like a sink with no drain, and the water just goes through the sink to the floor. This is the perfect scenario for shootouts in fantasy production. Game script wise, you want your QBs and receivers to be in a constant state of stress for throw mode. So ironically, while your players are suffering from being down in a game, you see Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, especially the post-game interviews where they're frustrated about losing. As a fantasy manager, you are ecstatic because they have to keep going out and hooping and putting up numbers. Speaking of putting up numbers, Bo Nix was QB9 heading into week 11, 28.78 fantasy points yesterday versus the Falcons, 28 of 33. That is an unreal 85% completion percentage, 307 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns. Just 2 carries for 5 yards. Bo Nix didn't need it on the ground yesterday. Bo Nix took advantage of the depleted Atlanta Falcons offense, 38-6. All right, they put foot up ass on the Falcons. Bo spread the ball all around. He went to, ready? Cortland Sutton, 7 for 78. I had a nice little ladder bet for Sutton on the alt receiving yard, so that was nice to see. Devon Vele, 4 for 66. Lil Jordan Humphrey, 4 for 52 and a touchdown. All right, he didn't help your fantasy teams, but he helped Bo Nix, right? Marvin Mims had a touchdown on 2 receptions for 49 yards. Shout out to Johnny Tuma for a write-up on Marvin Mims earlier in the week on Player Profiler News. And then Bo Nix even connected with Troy Franklin for a score. So there's that Oregon trail, that Oregon connection that they had together, showing off in the NFL. Bo Nix now has 5 QB1 weeks and 7 games as QB 14 or better. So Bo Nix, he's a must start in one quarterback leagues next week when he goes up, wait for it, against the soft Raiders defense. Dynasty contenders last year, in reflection, that got Bo Nix late in Superflex rookie drafts are thriving. So if you won championships and you had late picks in the first round, early second, you did very well getting yourself some Bo Nix. And then we have Anthony Richardson, honorable mention for a top performer. He had 2 rushing touchdowns with 1 passing touchdown. Now, detractors will say, well, you just got it on the ground. But if you were watching the game, Adonai Mitchell got tackled at the 1. It was a near flip-flop there where Anthony Richardson would have had 2 touchdown passes to the 1. A big day for Anthony Richardson. Honorable mention there, 28.8 fantasy points. So he was the 4th highest scoring quarterback heading into tonight. Let's go to the running backs. Saquon Barkley, all the way from Thursday, 33.8 fantasy points. Barkley showed why the Eagles pursued him heavily. 26 carries, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 catches for 52 yards. Personally, I had an alt receiving yards ladder for 25 and 40. The numbers were real good. I think it was plus 680 at 40 yards. And fortunately, Barkley hit those, but he had to do it coming alive in the second half. Barkley did most of his damage against the Commanders late, but that helped put the game away for the Philadelphia Eagles. Saquon Barkley was RB4 heading into Week 11. He is 3rd in our explosive rating metric with a score of 120. Coming into the week, Barkley, 3rd in carries, 3rd in red zone touches, despite the tush push by Jalen Hurts, vulturing Saquon Barkley. Barkley is a set and forget player. This has been, knock on wood, a healthy season for Barkley. Remarkable. Next, Breece Hall. The Jets lost, but Hall had burst in speed. He had that extra gear. He has been brought down on plays where you think, hey, this guy's going to be gone for a touchdown, and then he gets caught. Yesterday, Hall had a rushing and a receiving touchdown, 78 yards rushing, 7 receptions, 43 yards, an excellent balance, 31.1 fantasy points. This is the perfect time for the stretch run for Breece Hall to go off. These are the money-making weeks as we're leading up to the fantasy playoffs and, of course, the actual fantasy football playoffs. Then we have David Montgomery, 24.5 points, 2 touchdowns, 15 carries, 75 yards, 3 catches for 20 yards. Montgomery, he's been such a great best ball pick and great redraft pick. If you had a startup in Dynasty, David Montgomery's price tag was sensational. So in best ball, David Montgomery has had a very nice 69.8 best ball points added, which ranks him 15th. Not bad for where you got him at ADP, right around 7th and 8th round on Underdog. So just a great value and stand alone against other fantasy running backs. David Montgomery has been the truth. Mike, what do you make of some of these top performances?
Well, I'm gonna pipe in on a couple of them for sure because I wanted to get in earlier, but you were on such a roll. I didn't want to interrupt you, but honestly, the David Montgomery call here is excellent. I think he is just something that he still has longevity even in Dynasty for a couple of years here. His wear and tear hasn't been that much, you know what I mean? He had some injuries there in Chicago that kept him out of the lineup and, splitting carries with Jahmyr Gibbs. Both those guys are top 12 running backs right now. And the Lions are just on another level right now, and they're playing on another level. When Jared Goff goes in and throws 4 touchdowns after they had 3 rushing touchdowns, is pretty remarkable. The fact that they're able to do that, in the latter half of that game, it's just something that you don't see often. And when I saw those 2 rushing touchdowns go up on the board, the third one go up, I was like, oh man, this is not good for Jared Goff owners right now because I got a couple shares of him. And then I was really happy with the outcome of that. And another outcome I'm really happy with because I got a lot of Bo Nix shares. That has really turned around a lot of fantasy lineups in 2 quarterbacks leagues, especially, but 1 quarterback leagues. He's very startable in the right matchup. And Bo Nix has emerged, and wow, I don't think anybody could peg him for that. And it's just kind of unfortunate that you can't rely on anyone really outside of Cortland Sutton in that lineup every other week. And it's looking like maybe Marvin Mims might be carving out that Joker role. You see him kind of lying up in the backfield a little bit here. And that could be something that could be turning some fruitfulness. Sean Payton went out and invested a high draft capital pick on Marvin Mims last year. With that's all they had, and they moved up for him. So it's important to note that he's a guy that hasn't got in there yet, but he's one of Sean Payton's only draft picks. So I think there is plans for him to emerge. So Bo Nix, man, I think that this is legit. And if you don't have him as a top 12 dynasty quarterback, I think you're behind the 8 ball right now. And it's something that you really got to consider, especially with the upside on his feet and where that team could be headed with, not a ton of, weapons around him.
Now, Mike, you just spoke about part of the hurting that Bo Nix has put on some other teams. Now, can you tell us about some players, Mike, who are hurting bad right now? What do you got?
Yeah, you know what? It's actually not as bad as recent weeks. So, this segment won't be as harsh because, there wasn't a huge amount of injuries that were sustained. And actually, guys are coming back in the lineup, like Nico Collins tonight, which is a huge addition for fantasy gamers who had that Nico Collins share that believed in his, yards per route run. He's a great start this week. I had him as a top 5 pick, so hopefully he can emerge again in that offense. And I think that means really good stuff for CJ Stroud, another guy that is getting healthy. And I think the Chiefs are going to really need him with how ineffective Kareem Hunt has been the last couple games in the running game for the Chiefs. So Isiah Pacheco looking like, the Chiefs are going to maybe need him more in the stretch run than initially thought out, because with the Steelers looking great, they could be in the running now for that AFC title. The Bills are now in that. The Chiefs are in a layup now for that AFC title. So I think there's going to be stuff to play for here. They haven't looked great. And a team like Denver, they have to play again. They got to play the Chargers again. So there's some formidable opponents here. So I just think that there's a lot to play for now. And Isiah Pacheco coming back might be something that the Chiefs need to really make a move down the stretch run, especially if they want to clinch that number 1 seed and get the bye, right? That's a huge thing. Darnell Mooney.
Sorry,
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
To your point, they get in for what we're watching tonight with Nico Collins coming back for the Texans. They get the Texans in week 15 or 16, week 16. So that's another challenge there too.
Yeah, exactly. So we will see, and they're going to have to play hard. And I think they also have the Steelers as well on Christmas Day. So that's another one we got to really worry about big time here, right?
Only takes 1 week, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the Steelers could be even with them at that stage, right? So you never know.
You're right.
Well, all right. Well, Darnell Mooney suffered that hamstring injury, mild Achilles strain. So I'm thinking he's going to miss next week and maybe another week on top of that. We'll have to see. Initial reports suggest that, but it's still really early in the week. And we'll have to look on that. I mean, Mooney has been, a really bright spot this year for the Falcons. And I think, Kirk Cousins is really going to miss him if he does get out of the lineup there, if he does miss a game or two. Now, Trevor Lawrence, I was expecting to see a firing today, but that did not go down. And I'm surprised, honestly, after that, shit kicking that, the Jags took on the chin pretty hard. And I think that could have been even worse if they really wanted to give it to them. But, the Jags, the team gave up on, Doug Peterson, it looks like. So I'm not sure what they're thinking if they haven't canned him yet, but we'll see what happens, because I don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to play another snap for Doug Peterson. I could see him coming back if he's fired. And we'll see what happens. There's a lot of rumors about Ben Johnson, after yesterday, getting a look there, wants to, wouldn't mind coaching Trevor Lawrence from what we hear. So these are all, indicators that things could be on the move. But They also may want to keep Peterson around because of that first overall pick that they could, Hunter might be on their radar. There's a lot of, upside there with that pick. So a lot of integrity here that it could be on stake.
Hey, here's a question for you. If you're Ben Johnson, and maybe the audience can answer too in the comment section below, if you're Ben Johnson, do you prefer the Jaguars job or possibly the Cincinnati Bengals job with Joe Burrow, but it's up in the air whether Chase is going to be back or Higgins?
Are you kidding me? I mean, if you're like that, that's a no-brainer for me. I'm looking like at the Cincinnati Bengals. They're honestly a top 10 team right now that could potentially miss the playoffs. Well, they're going to miss the playoffs at this stage. And, if they could make it, they could easily win the Super Bowl. Like not easily, but they have a really good shot at doing it. Just look at them. I mean, their defense has not helped them, and Joe Burrow hasn't had his weapons fully healthy. We saw a little bit of what happened last night, but looking pretty good. Joe Burrow is keeping that team on his shoulder. So yeah, I would much prefer to be sitting in the Bengals driver's seat than the Jags.
Do you think that's the most appealing job that would be open from an offensive coordinator standpoint to become head coach?
Yeah, probably. I mean, you got to look at maybe the Cowboys being one that it could be sought after because of CeeDee Lamb, but they as a guy that is if I would be looking for a head coach job, I'd be hard pressed to want to go coach the Cowboys with the pressure that's there. But some people want that, and it would have to be the right fit for that head coaching job, right? So, but you never know with Jerry Jones. Like it's just it's a crapshoot. Let's move on. Brian Thomas Jr. saw some performance dip after that injury he took, but now looking like he's coming back. They relied on him a little bit here on the last and the garbage time there. So something to note. I never gave up on Brian Thomas, and I'm still thinking he's going to be the guy there moving forward. Now, Dalton Kincaid, the Bills were without him, and they didn't miss a beat. Probably likely to return in week 13 or 14 here. Same with Sam Laporta as well. Both those guys missed. And in a week where a lot of tight ends were on buys or missed because of injury, there were some steady performers in the tight end position. I'll tell you what, Jonnu Smith, Taysom Hill, if you had started any of those guys, you're probably pretty happy with the outcomes there. And then to round off the injuries here, we're looking at Mike Evans potentially returning after the bye the Bucs had in week 11. So week 12 could happen here. And they definitely need them. They're in pursuit of, that title for the division there. And the Falcons haven't looked great. And Kirk Cousins got pulled from that game. They're going in for a much needed bye to get, their ducks in a row. So hopefully there's some changes that happen there. But yeah, that's the injury roundup. So maybe the Podfather can, give us a message from our injury finder here on Player Profiler.
Hey, you're in your fantasy draft and someone says, hey, that guy's injury prone. I don't want him. And you're like, I don't know. I don't think you can predict injuries. Well, guess what? Now you can. Injury proneness is real. At Player Profiler, we have the data on these players, and it's all in the Injury Finder app. Their injury track record back through time, exactly where they were injured, how severe it is. We look at the BMI data, and we crunch it all together, and we give you probabilities that a player will miss multiple games this NFL season, as well as the complete database of NFL injuries and the ability to compare two players and look at their injury track record. The Injury Finder is powerful, and it's only $5. If it's worth it to have that peace of mind when you're drafting, go get it.
That's right. Go get it. And, the injuries are clearing up. So hopefully we don't see a whole lot more coming down the stretch. Now, Coach, bring us the rundown on the top performers at the wide receiver and tight end positions.
So as we just carry on, the theme here, Lion players, Goff, David Montgomery, and Amon-Ra all clearing in the top 5. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 38.7 PPR points. A perfect 11 of 11 for receiving, 161 yards and 2 touchdowns. Amon-Ra was the wide receiver 6 heading into the week. he is clearing CeeDee Lamb, Mike, who we had talked about on Combat Zone and, of course, prior to the show tonight. And circumstances change, but it is difficult to deny Amon-Ra St. Brown no matter what. Amon-Ra is 5th in target share, 7th in receptions, has 9 total touchdowns, 4th in red zone targets. So the ones that count, the matter, we talk about that for running backs, but Amon-Ra is getting targeted in the red zone. Money, 12th in targets. He's thrived with Jared Goff, as Amon-Ra's target accuracy is number 1. So that's a bullish thing for both Amon-Ra and Jared Goff. Now, I'm going to put T. Higgins and Jamar Chase together. Higgins was 2, Chase was 4. Higgins with 29.8 fantasy points, Chase with 26.5. Much like Matthew Stafford, providing top 10 weekly upside for Kupp and Nacua, Joe Burrow does the same for Chase and Higgins. You can never bench Chase and T. Higgins. You never have to worry about one eating from the other. They're both eating really good. The problem for the Bengals will be in how will they pay Jamar Chase, as it looks like T. Higgins is ready to be out of Cincinnati. Up next is Cooper Kupp. Matthew Stafford supported both Kupp and Nacua as top 5 plays this week. Recall a few weeks ago against the Seahawks where Stafford had Kupp and Demarcus Robinson. Remember those 2 touchdowns that Robinson had? Of course, Robinson had the game winner versus the Seahawks. Both Kupp and Robinson were inside the top 8. Cooper Kupp yesterday, 10 targets, 6 receptions, 106 yards, and 2 touchdowns. 28.6 fantasy points. It's helping you win your week. The detraction against Kupp would be fear of Nacua. But Stafford has proven Kupp and Nacua have value insulation to be top 10 plays every single week. Now, let's go over to the tight end. I had buried it a little bit, but how can you deny Taysom Hill? A dominating performance, 41.52 points. Hill paid off in DFS, lineup leagues where you spot started him, and of course, best ball sites that have Hill as a tight end are related. Hill went 7 for 138 rushing for 3 touchdowns. You'd expect that from a running back, even for a running back that is elite. However, that's the beauty of being listed as a tight end. That's where we get this value. Hill had a higher fantasy output, though. Talk about positions. This is kind of ironic, right? Better than quarterback Jared Goff. Better than the number 1 Saquon Barkley. Better than Amon-Ra St. Brown. And better than the next best, Brock Bowers. Taysom Hill was the top fantasy performer across the whole NFL. Pivoting back to Brock Bowers, 31.3 points off the bye week, 13 catches, 16 targets, 126 yards, and a touchdown reception. Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, they go back and forth on weekly rankings. It's easy to put Brock Bowers as the tight end 1 in Dynasty. This is a crowning performance. Bowers has 89 targets. He's 3rd in our explosive rating with 121 score. Heading into week 11, was 3rd in target rate, 2nd in targets, and 5th in target share. He only has 3 touchdowns, so when the regression hits, it's going to hit in a big way. And then lastly, Jonnu Smith, 28 fantasy points. He's my guy for our My Guy section. I could not be happier. He filled in merrily for Trey McBride gamers who needed a streamer. So good week all the way for tight end streamers and, of course, receivers. What do you make of that, Mike?
Yeah, Brock Bowers has been my top tight end since week 3 in Dynasty, just based off of like usage and what I see in their offense moving forward, and just how disgruntled Devontae Adams was. So like I just know that the opportunity is there. I really like Trey McBride's outlook, and you're going to hear that a little bit about like in my bullish take on Kyler Murray headed in the next half of the season here. But I still don't think he's going to supplant Brock Bowers with the way that Brock Bowers has some touchdown upside. I know Trey McBride has been deprived of the touchdown, so we'll have to see how that regresses. But hoping both those guys are smash picks at this stage of the game. Let's get into some news today that happened, and kind of shocked a lot of people. I mean, it's overdue in my opinion, but Daniel Jones is getting benched for Tommy DeVito is now taking over for the Giants as their starting quarterback. There's some immediate impact in my opinion, and it'll be significant to the passing game for skill players like Malik Neighbors, and I think it's really good also for Tyrone Tracy. This could change the lead to more opportunities, especially given DeVito's different playing style compared to Jones. While Jones struggled to lead to an anemic passing attack, DeVito might bring more of a controlled, short to immediate passing game that benefits those two guys, especially in my opinion, with, Malik Neighbors yards after the catch. I think they'll be just a little bit more controlled. He might have some more downfield looks as well. So these guys will benefit there, in my opinion, from this move. I think this offense might be a little bit slower pace, but they needed to make a change. I'm surprised, they waited till, now to announce it. I thought that maybe they would have done it before the bye, but here we go, folks. He's got some time to look at things. And what are your thoughts on this move there, Jeremiah? Are you in favor of this? Obviously, their running game might differ now. And they may not. It can't get any worse, right? Could it? I don't know.
And that's just the point. Since it really can't get any worse, you figure you at least want to roll with somebody else. But we thought it would be Drew Lock. And the problem is this is going to be a very appealing matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary. And the main problem, though, is until the Giants get a left tackle and improve their offensive line, it's going to be hard for anybody to be successful in there. But a big problem, though, was Daniel Jones. You would have hoped that he could fix things off the bye week, but it just has not been there. So why not a change? I personally would have preferred Drew Lock. But hey, it's going to be Tommy DeVito. It's going to be a sideshow. I'm going to still be very hard pressed to bench Malik Neighbors. So I'm going to go with that. And then I kind of like what you said, though, about Tyrone Tracy. Maybe it'll impact and help him some. Of course, it's very much a narrow fantasy value for the Giants. You want Malik Neighbors, you want Tyrone Tracy. So if you're playing DFS weekly, those are two plug spots where you maybe run Mike Evans on the other end, right? But you're really not going to be interested in Tommy DeVito. You just hope that he can steer the ship and be capable and confident enough.
Yeah, so both Neighbors and Tracy stand to gain, I think, from DeVito's promotion, but you never know. This could be a quick move to Drew Lock if DeVito doesn't perform early, right? So there's got to be some temperament there as far as the outlook. So, take this with a grain of salt. I don't think this, hurts Malik Neighbors in any way. I think this might actually help him if he could get a ball thrown a bit closer to him. You know what I mean? If he can get a catchable ball thrown at him, his upside as his yards go, right? And if they could just hyper target him, he is their bread and butter. And I think those two guys, Tyrone Tracy and Malik Neighbors, could do some damage down the stretch here. So folks, if you're enjoying the show, don't miss out on more exclusive content. Subscribe to the Player Profiler YouTube channel at Player Profiler News. Follow us on X at Profiler_NFL and at our website at http://www.playerprofiler.com. but /news for all the latest and breaking news and its impact on fantasy football. So, Jeremiah, bullish, bearish? Let's get into that segment before we do our quick Monday night primer.
0-1. M.O. Come on.
So we did get one little question there. Malik Neighbors or CeeDee rest of the season? I'm just going to say Malik Neighbors rest of the season for me, just because I hope there's going to be more competency at the quarterback position. What's your take?
Yeah, I'm going with Malik Neighbors too. Yeah, I mean, it's tight. I mean, it sucks for both of them. What's up, Toronto Dave? What up?
Yep, shout out to him, man. Love him.
Yeah, man. I met him in person at the expo. He's actually crushing our draft night out draft. He's in my division. So shout out to Toronto Dave. Always a fan. So keep pumping us there, Toronto Dave. So let's get into your bearish take here.
Yep. So my bearish, it's gonna sound like a positive. You'd like to find a positive in anything, right? But I'm bearish on Jonathan Brooks the rest of the season. I don't see him paying off down the stretch. That's why I'm bearish on him. Chuba Hubbard, RB6 on the season, a 110 explosive rating score, is ranked 13th. Think of where you drafted Chuba Hubbard, round 13, 14, 15 on underdog. Just getting RB2 production is a victory at ADP. Chuba has had 5 weeks as RB1 or better. 8 of 10 games, Chuba has been an RB2 or better. So you're getting what you paid for and then some. Chuba Hubbard just got re-signed. Chuba is 5th in carries, 9th in RB targets with 35, 5th in weighted opportunities, 11 in red zone touches with 31. You love to see it. 2nd in breakaway runs with 12, and 7th in best ball points added with 92. Chuba is 3rd in rushing yards with 818. If you were to tell somebody Chuba Hubbard is going to be 3rd in rushing yards in 2024, you'd have thought they were crazy. I don't see how you can justify Jonathan Brooks getting a 50% of a timeshare, and that's just best case scenario, in his return back for week 12. The playoff schedule is juicy. Home versus Dallas, home versus Arizona, away at Tampa Bay. By the time Jonathan Brooks onboards to the offense, you won't be confident in starting him for the fantasy playoffs. So having only 3 weeks until the fantasy playoffs, and he hasn't played a game, give me Chuba Hubbard as the alpha veteran in the Panthers backfield. Now, Mike, coming off a bye, Kyler Murray, what's your bullish take on Kyler Murray?
Oh, yeah. I mean, after his week 10 performance against the Jets, that to me was a loud statement that he's returned to form and it's time to be bullish on his fantasy outlook moving forward. After missing the start of the season last year due to a torn ACL, Murray shook the league in the latter half of that season. And now it's the latter half of this season after the bye, and I can just see that history repeating itself just based off of the way they headed into the bye. And 22 for 24, 266 yards and a touchdown. His 92% completion rate last week set a franchise record for consecutive completions, showcasing that now Kyler Murray is back. 21 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. His upside remains potent. 30 rushing yards per game. It's a dip from his peak, but it's coming together. Remember, he had a torn ACL. He's coming back from that. And with the Cardinals, in number 1 spot in the division, tight as can be, going up against the Seahawks this week, there's a long stretch ahead here where there's going to be some hard-fought games for these Cardinals, especially if they want to win that division. Kyler Murray is going to need to win games with his legs. He had 17 consecutive completions in week 10. He's hitting on all strides. He was a QB1 in the latter half of 2023 when he returned from injury. So Kyler Murray, the combination of his passing efficiency, his potential rushing ability, I think he's a must-start moving forward. He may not be quite the MVP caliber level that he used to be, but he's certainly trending in that direction. He's making him the perfect gamble right now for your fantasy stretch. Murray's back, and he's running the show both with his arms and his legs. Let's go, Kyler Murray.
You love to see it, Mike. And 4 straight wins for the Cardinals, speaking to the attestation of how good they've played in the last 2 games, 29-9 against the Bears, 31-6 against the Jets. I think that's a great call, Mike. A good schedule down the stretch. Kyler Murray, QB9 right now, and he's got more games to play, of course. He's now survived the bye, so expect him to go up. So I like your call on him being bullish. And now we're going to get into tonight's game with our coach's corner and our chef's table. All right, we've got a very good game tonight. The Texans are atop the AFC South standings at 6-4. They've withstood the storm of missing Nico Collins. Tonight, they have a chance to kick their in-state rival Dallas Cowboys while the Dallas Cowboys are down. The stadium might actually fall apart before the game's even finished. CJ Stroud is the QB 17 on the season. He only has 2 QB1 games this year, with 4 games as a top 15 quarterback. So definitely missing his guys this year between Diggs and Nico Collins. Stroud is not known as a rushing quarterback. So last year, in 15 games, CJ Stroud had over 4,100 passing yards. That was 7th in and was also 7th in fantasy points per game. So the path for me when I see CJ Stroud as far as archetype is somebody like Matthew Stafford, right? A laser show for a lot of yardage every year, and of course, high touchdown passing numbers. So some bullish stats for Stroud to turn things around, keeping in mind that he's getting Nico Collins back. Stroud is 6th in money throws with 11, 6th in air yards per attempt, 7th in passing yards, 1st in air yards, 9th in team pass plays per game, 3rd in deep ball attempts with 40. What is missing from CJ Stroud? Where he has struggled? His weapons. Now he gets Nico Collins back. Over at DD Fantasy Football, Ray G always talks about, are you the truck or the trailer? With so many injuries for the Texans offense, it looks like Nico Collins is the truck to CJ Stroud's trailer. Nico Collins is 4th in explosive rating metric with a score of 129. Collins has played 5 games this year with finishes of wide receiver 13, 4, 37, 1, and 19. Now remember, Collins left early in week 5 versus the Bills. Nico Collins is 2nd in fantasy points per game with 21.3, 3rd in expected fantasy points per game with 21.6. Nico Collins is 2nd in yards per route run, 4th in yards per target, 6th in yards per reception, and 3rd in yards per team pass attempt. I tried to find some stats that wouldn't deflate or inflate based on how much time he has missed, right? Per game basis. These numbers are very impressive. And of course, we need to adjust for the fact that he's missed so much time. Prior to Nico Collins getting hurt, all things equal, we were looking at Nico Collins being a top 3 pick in 2025 fantasy drafts. Now, his opponent, CeeDee Lamb, okay? CeeDee Lamb and Nico Collins, there was a legitimate conversation. It is a legitimate conversation now for other reasons about who you prefer, but the point remains that you're excited for Nico Collins to be back. Now, speaking of exciting, let's talk about Joe Mixon. Talk about an amazing free agency acquisition. Mixon is the RB12 on the season. He's only played 7 games, though. Mixon was a perfect 0 running back pick in the mid-single digit rounds on Underdog, and of course in fantasy drafts for redraft. Mixon has been ever consistent, 5 RB1 games and 6 as RB15 or better. Joe Mixon is 3rd in opportunity share at 79.9%, 10th in carries with 151, 6th in red zone touches with 34. Joe Mixon is highly favored in the red zone. Just like Kyron Williams, you want running backs, regardless of efficiency, to be favored in the money zone, in the red zone, in the green zone. Mixon is 4th in touchdowns with 8. Expect this to continue. Running back is about talent and opportunity. So regardless of efficiency, having Mixon on your fantasy squads has been incredible. Mixon is 8th in best ball points added with 91.9 and was a perfect mid-single digit round pick. 12th in breakaway runs and 2nd in dominator rating at 41.7%. Mixon's 24 targets are 30th at the RB position, but even in PPR, touchdowns are king. So then for secondary and tertiary players, don't expect consistency from John Mechie, but Mechie blocks well, and he does get open. Mechie had a very nice wide receiver 8 performance in week 10 with 5 for 74 and a touchdown line. And then Dalton Schultz, he's been nothing special in 10 games. He's tight end 24. Schultz is 2nd in unrealized air yards with 256, 2nd in ADOT, 3rd in routes run, 3rd in air yards with 447, and 11th in targets with 48. We spoke to touchdowns being important for fantasy value. Ready? Dalton Schultz has 0 touchdowns. If Schultz had just 5 touchdowns, he'd be between Tucker Kraft and Mark Andrews as tight end 7 and 8. Don't expect Schultz to light it up with Nico Collins returning. Then, of course, how can I forget Tank Dell? Tank Dell should be freed up a lot more and have much more opportunity share and less pressure on him. So this is a huge boost getting Nico Collins back for Tank Dell. Don't be fooled by the size. Tank Dell is somebody who CJ Stroud handpicked. As the Texans are getting back on track, which I believe will start tonight, I think you're going to see both Nico and Tank Dell take a big step back to their rightful places of Nico being a top-tier player and then Tank Dell being somebody that you'll want to acquire in Dynasty. What do you got for the Cowboys, Mike?
Well, I wish I had some optimism here for the Cowboys, but we all know what that's about right now. And the Cowboys are off and they're playing against the Texans. And you demonstrated pretty thoroughly there how, it's going to be a pretty Texan forward game here. But Cooper Rush coming in, his fantasy outlook took a hit. Looks like he's going to be starting again tonight, and Trey Lance is probably, biting at the heels again. But, unless you're in a super flex league, he's largely unstartable, and I'm not looking for him to be anything more than, a guy that I'm desperate to play. But CeeDee Lamb, on the other hand, here, despite Rush's struggles under center, Lamb remains the primary target for the Cowboys, and his volume could just keep him fantasy relevant as a wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside. I know that's a lot to hear for CeeDee Lamb owners right now, but it's the reality that, we're facing right now. Last week, he did account for 31% target share, which is great to see, even though it just amounted for 21 yards on 10 targets. While Lamb's target volume is a positive sign, his upside for yardage and touchdowns is limited with Rush at quarterback. Now let's move on to Jake Ferguson, who's been a consistent but unspectacular option at tight end. He ranks as the tight end 18 right now, but he's got some upside here, but not anymore with Cooper Rush at quarterback. I just think that this whole situation in the passing game is, really, really bleak for the Cowboys moving forward. There's another guy that's going to take a hit as well, and that's Rico Dowdle. He's the featured back, but moving forward, he's just not going to get that opportunity because the Cowboys aren't going to be in a lot of scoring opportunity. They're not going to have the opportunity to run the ball a whole lot. He'll be a flex-worthy play at times with the right matchup, but the whole Dallas Cowboys offense is really, really struggling right now. It's been struggling all year, even with Dak Prescott in the lineup. And I think it really shows how important a running game is in the NFL. And I can't believe the Cowboys didn't go and get a running back in the draft or in the offseason because it's really, paying the price right now. Dak Prescott's injured. Maybe a better running game would have, protected him a little bit better. And there's nothing else outside of CeeDee Lamb, and CeeDee Lamb's taking a hit right now, and I'm worried about him. That's why I chose Neighbors over Lamb, is because, CeeDee Lamb's shoulder as well he's banged up too. He's taken a beating every single game, and there's nobody else that a defense has to target right now other than CeeDee Lamb. So, back in the day when Cooper Rush played 2 years ago, CeeDee Lamb had some great games, but that was when they had a better running game. They had Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott running really well that year, and they don't have that to take any pressure off. So what do you got to do? All you got to do is worry about CeeDee Lamb because your quarterback is garbage and your offensive line isn't playing good and you got no run game. So I'm really worried about CeeDee Lamb moving forward, and it's not looking good. So I would prefer to have Malik Neighbors in a situation where at least they have a run game that can support a little bit more. Tyrone Tracy is a way better back, and they're playing better. Dable's been playing with less for a longer time, whereas McCarthy hasn't had that, and his defense isn't as good as the Giants either. So I just think that the Giants are going to be in more games as well, and Malik Neighbors is just the pick there. What about you there?
And to your point with Brian Daboll, if Brian Daboll gets fired, that is just a gift to the rest of the NFL because he has such a great mind. And I think motivation-wise, talk about Doug Peterson, right? The players aren't necessarily motivated for Doug Peterson anymore. You could see that in Dallas possibly as soon as tonight with Mike McCarthy. Just go listen to Michael Parsons talking about Mike McCarthy. And I think you're going to squeeze more toothpaste out of the tube with the New York Giants and what they have there. So to your point, Malik Neighbors over CeeDee Lamb. I think in Dynasty, you have to have that discipline, though, to try and pursue and buy CeeDee Lamb if you can get him off weak hands. The problem is people are going to want yesterday's price for CeeDee Lamb, knowing what they've got, right? But in this type of a market, if you can stomach maybe 80% of his old price for CeeDee Lamb, I think you got to do it. You got to bite it and just wear and take on that bad stretch, which you know is coming. Now, Mike, we did get a question. It was in regards to Pacheco or Dobbins. We had asked about redraft or dynasty. I think
I'm
just
assuming
off
this is
the
rest
rip-
of season.
Yeah.
Of season. I'm thinking here right now, and to me, I think we've seen Gus Edwards come in. He's eaten away a little bit here. The Chiefs, like I mentioned earlier, are going to be needing Isiah Pacheco back, but at the same time, Dobbins is coming in and he's still playing at a high level. The Chargers are just taking some of that pressure off. So he's still their lead back, and he's working on all cylinders. The Chiefs, on the other hand, I just think that this situation is something to monitor, because I'm worried about him coming off that injury, and they tend to come off slow from these injuries. And really, the Chiefs have a game next week against the Panthers, which they're not going to be rushing. The Panthers are playing better, and this could be a trap game again for the Chiefs, honestly. But the way that Chuba Hubbard's playing, and Bryce Young hasn't looked horrible the last couple of games. But the Chiefs might not need that game. So like I'm thinking they're going to be, moving him along slowly. And also, we got to keep in mind that Kareem Hunt has been very good as a supporting role back in Cleveland as a pass catching back. And if we remember a couple of years ago, Jerick McKinnon down the home stretch was really used as a Chiefs rover in pass catching out of the backfield. So they do have a use for that. And Kareem Hunt is definitely a better pass catcher than Isiah Pacheco out of the backfield. So I could see that being something that is utilized here. So yeah, that would be my take there. I'd be staying with Dobbins rest of season at this stage.
Yeah, it's just a little too timeshare-y for Kansas City. And you can see where Kansas City has so many things that they're playing for that they can take priority on. Hey, Travis Kelce took a dump like the first half of the NFL season, getting in shape, and now he's winding into better form. So they have just different levels of seriousness for how they want to lay things out. There's a longer, wider accordion out path for the Kansas City Chiefs. Different priorities, right? And to your point, I think J.K. Dobbins gets just a lot more of the run, and we get to see him in full fruition. Yep, we got, hey guys, urgent trade question. Should I trade Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Breece Hall for Kamara, Garrett Wilson, and McLaurin? My other running backs are Breece, Achane, Mixon. Wide receivers are A.J. Brown, Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Quentin Johnson. I'm going to assume this is one PPR scoring. Yep, 10-man PPR league. Preparing for fantasy playoffs and a record of 7-4. What do you say, Mike?
Okay, so should I trade Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Breece Hall? Okay, so for Kamara. Okay, so Kamara, we got to look at as far as like we're apples to apples here. So we're looking at Kamara for Breece. Okay, Garrett Wilson for Neighbors. Like, I'm not sure you need to be making a trade here for the hell of making a trade at this stage. It's so cutting dry. Like, I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr., in my opinion, is coming on. Malik Neighbors is getting a new quarterback situation. So there's some vulnerability there. Garrett Wilson, if we look at what has happened there in New York the last couple of weeks, his target share has not been what it used to be since Devontae Adams. I am not trading just for the base of trading, especially when it's 1-for-1 at this stage. Yeah. And honestly, I think the players you have are probably where you need to be anyhow.
Yeah, and I think maybe you're thinking that you're going for a little bit of an improvement at the receiver position. I love Terry McLaurin, but the fact is you have Malik Neighbors. We spoke to part of what we talk about and what we play about. If Kyler Murray, Mike, if we're going to be bullish on Kyler Murray, we have to see, especially after this bye week, which they've had, that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to catapult up as well. Brees Hall, we spoke to, is rounding into form. He and Kamara are close enough where it just may not be worth it. And you're talking about you would have Garrett Wilson. He can definitely get ghosted as well by Aaron Rodgers. You never know how bad it could go. And, I love Terry McLaurin, but at the same time, I think you're getting the alphas with Neighbors. It's a better situation coming up, an improvement. Believe it or not, you thought you would throw up saying it, but Tommy DeVito or Drew Lock for Neighbors. We believe in the ascension for Marvin Harrison Jr. And then it's very tough to trade Brees Hall. A very fair, even trade if you did take the deal, but I'm going to lean to what Mike said. Neighbors, Harrison Jr., Brees Hall, and congrats on the 7-4 record.
Yeah, for me here too, though, if you look at Kamara versus Brees, Kamara's getting gobbled a lot in the red zone. Taysom Hill took 3 touchdowns away. And Terry McLaurin, as much as I got a lot of Terry McLaurin shares. Don't get me wrong. I got a ton of them, and he's been really good for me this year. Some of my biggest leagues I have him in. But I'm very worried about him moving forward in this stretch run here, especially with how Jaden Daniels has looked. He's been banged up a bit, and since that injury, he hasn't looked the same. So I'm thinking Jaden Daniels is more of what he was at the beginning of the year, but he's not as strong as he is, down the stretch here, because I think he's a bit injured. So I would stay put, especially it's not one-sided for you. So you don't need to make that trade, especially at the record you are. So yeah, that would be my guess here.
And week 16, 17 for the Cardinals, they get the Panthers and the Rams. Between now and the fantasy playoffs, they get the Seattle Seahawks twice. So I really like the ascension. Good call, Mike, on Kyler Murray. So if we're into Murray, we, by virtue, are going to be into Marvin Harrison Jr. So a good, fun trade. And it's funny, in a 10-team league, you're going to get a lot of what look like these stacked teams. So in understanding you have a very good 7-4 team, I think, Marlon, you understand as well that you're trying to get a super team to put it over the top, because the waiver wire can be plentiful in a 10-team league, depending on how deep your rosters are, of course. But I think your team is Kyler Murray, so you don't want to break up that Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. stack. So I would stay put, and you're really, the risk level, you're not really getting much reward for the divergent upside of acquiring the second part of that package. So again, Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Brees Hall, I would stay put with them. So what do you think, Mike? Good show?
I think it was a great show. I think, the game's already started here. We got a mix-in touchdown, a nice run there. So let's get our viewers off with a bang here there, Jeremiah. What do you got to say, my man?
Hey, I like that. I've got a mix-in, I think a 1, 2, and I can't remember if I did him for 3 touchdowns tonight, but I've got a ladder at least up to 2 touchdowns. So that's great to hear. Maybe I just should be like that guy who goes up from the basement to grab a beer and doesn't watch any of the game, and just good things happen, right? Don't turn the game on and don't watch it, because bad things will start to happen. So we will see you all next week. Thank you for all the comments. Like, share, subscribe. We will see you next week.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to PlayerProfiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take